since I edited and I watched the video that we made, I realized there's not enough content in there. There's not enough uh, smart learning or whatever. So this is my rendition on 2.2. So with the expansion of U.S. territory, migration was inevitable. And there were a lot of different people coming in for religion. They wanted to be able to spread the word of the gospel without a lot of persecution. A lot of people wanted to make money, and they thought that America was the place to do so. And so new territory with all these new people meant that a lot more people had to own land. They needed land. So in 1862, Congress passed two pieces of legislation that encouraged Western settlement, and they passed the Homestead Act and the Moral Land Grant Act. And so as more and more people moved west, many people were calling on the U.S. government. They wanted the U.S. government to open Native American land. These were all white people. And they wanted the U.S. government to open Native American land so that they can have it, because the Native Americans didn't need it, apparently. And so, which was what they felt like. And so in 1889, Congress agreed to this, and they opened central Oklahoma for settlement, and hence the Oklahoma land rush. And so while all this was happening, African Americans and Chinese immigrants and Mexicans and women were all becoming more prevalent, and women were having greater freedom in the West than they did in the East, and a lot of people were getting more freedom, and so yeah. And so in the late 1800s, the Chinese immigrants, they were coming through ports. A lot of them were coming through San Francisco from Asia? No, from China. So, and a lot of people didn't like a lot of white people didn't like the Chinese immigration, so they wanted to pass they thought that the foreigners, they drove down their chances, their jobs, they took away their jobs, and they were just, because they were willing to work for less pay, and this was just because the white people were racist. And so, and so in 1882, the Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, meaning that Chinese people were not able to migrate to the United States anymore, but this was repealed in 1943, which was a long time from the 1800s. And so the annexation, moving to the Mexicans, the annexation of Texas and the Mexican-American War made the relations between the U.S. and Mexico pretty rough and intense, through much of the 1800s. And because of the interaction between the white settlers and the Mexicans who already lived in the Southwest, Mexican language had great impact on the white settlers, and that's where we get our cowboys, the things that cowboys wear and cowboys do. We get all this from the Mexicans. And then there are the Native Americans, and they greatly depended on buffalo. The European Americans, I'm going to read this straight out the book. The European Americans who moved out west had conflict with Native Americans living in Western territories. The Plains Indians, for instance, greatly depended on the buffalo. People were killing the buffalo. They depended on the buffalo for food, for shelter, for clothes. They depended on it for a lot of things, and people were killing them, taking away their food and shelter and clothes. And so then came the rise of the cattle industry, which also greatly affected the Plains Indians. And ranchers would often slaughter the buffalo that otherwise would have competed with cattle for food. So ranching also meant that even more land was taken from the Native Americans for farmland. And then a number of violent wars started breaking out after the problems with all the reservations that were going on. And so, on a number of occasions, Native American people chose to resist white settlement rather than to accept it. And in 1861, U.S. officials forced the Cheyenne to move, to give up their land, and it had land that had been promised to them by the U.S. government. So the U.S. government had promised, I'm confused. Anyway, so they were forced off their land, and this caused the Sand Creek Massacre, which left over 270 people, mostly women and children, dead. And the news of the Sand Creek Massacre spread, and the tribes were getting so mad, and they were so angry, and they were like, how can the white people do this to us? And so they wanted to rise up, and they wanted to do something about it. So the Sioux Indians, they rose up, and in 1876, a U.S. commander, he did something about it, and then this was the Battle of Little Bighorn, and the Sioux lost, the Indians lost. And then came Wounded Knee. This was the last notable armed conflict between the U.S. and the Native Americans, and it occurred in 1890. And this was when these Indians, this tribe of Indians, they were practicing this ghost dance. It was the Sioux, I think. And they were practicing this ghost dance because they wanted everything to be back to normal. They hated the white people, and it didn't really have, like, it had a significant meaning, but it wasn't like, oh, we're fixing to go kill all the white people. It was like, we miss how things were before the white people, and we want things to be the same, we miss things, and anyway. So the army believed that the Sioux were rising up, and that that it was just crazy, and so they assumed things, and it started a gunfight, and a lot of people died, and it says more than 150 Native American women, men, and children, most of whom were unarmed, lay dead. And so in 1887, Congress passed the Dawes Act. This was meant to assimilate the Native Americans and make them more like the white people, and it really failed because the Native Americans did not want to be like the white people. They weren't willing to accept it, and so the Native American population decreased because of this. Not because of that, because of starvation and diseases and poverty and all kinds of things. So anyway, moral of the story, white people leave Native Americans alone. Thanks a lot.